Hey guys, tonight we're pulling an all-nighter on the graveyard shift, but this one doesn't smell like cheap coffee and stale donuts. We're deep in the Navajo Nation, working a bizarre liaison case that has tribal authorities terrified, and the silence out here. It's a living thing. It breathes. It watches. The air outside is impossibly cold, despite the high desert summer. It's midnight, maybe 12:05 a.m., and the only sound is the persistent, low hiss of the radio static, like a snake sleeping beneath the console. Rain taps tiny, desperate rhythms on the squad car window, not cooling, but heavy, metallic drops that vanish the moment they hit the parched earth. My flickering spotlight slices through the fog that shouldn't exist in this elevation, illuminating empty, desolate stretches of BIA Road that stretch forever into the blackness. This is the midnight patrol where the streetlights are thousands of stars, and the alleys are vast, unmarked canyons. You probably won't make it to dawn after this one. The case file sits heavy on the passenger seat, humidity warping the cheap cardstock. It details the operational silence of Sergeant Thomas Yazzie, a tribal officer who, 3 weeks ago, encountered something on these desolate tracks and hasn't uttered a single word since. Medically, he's fine. Physically, he's sound. But psychologically, he is gone. He communicates only by shaking his head or painstakingly drawing figures on a small whiteboard. His eyes, they're the thing that gets me. They look past you, not at you, fixed on a horizon no one else can see. I was brought in by the state police as an objective third party, someone who understands the procedure but is divorced from the cultural dread that permeates this specific corner of the country. I'm supposed to review his logs, retrace his last patrol, and figure out if this is PTSD, shock, or something far worse. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what I do here. Tonight, we need all the friendly energy we can get. Look down at your screen, tell me where you are right now, and what time it is. Let me know I'm not completely alone out here in the void. Now, dim the lights, maybe crack open a window for that midnight fog, and let's hit the streets together. My initial anchor, the piece of solid, bureaucratic ground I clung to when I first arrived at the Shiprock substation, was the official missing persons report. A family of 3, the Nakawai clan, vanished from their hogan near the base of the mountain. No struggle, no forced entry, just dinner plates left cooling on the table. Sergeant Yazzie was the first officer on the scene, approximately 24 hours after they were reported missing. The paperwork is meticulously kept, a testament to the rigorous standards of the Navajo tribal police despite their isolation. Yazzie's initial report, written before the silence descended, is perfectly structured. Time of arrival, weather conditions, clear, no fog then, and a description of the scene. Procedure demands detail. He noted the presence of strange, non-human footprints surrounding the hogan, inconsistent with local wildlife, too heavy for coyote, too bipedal for deer, and far too wide for human children. He noted the tracks led not toward the reservation boundary, but directly into the flank of the mountain, into the rock itself, where they simply ceased to exist. I look up from the page, out into the impenetrable blackness. The air pressure feels heavy, like standing at the bottom of a deep well. The radio static hums, an electronic lullaby that usually provides comfort, background noise that proves civilization is still out there. Tonight, the static sounds strained, as if something is pushing against the signal, attempting to modulate the white noise into something recognizable. I pull the patrol cruiser off the paved road and onto the graded dirt of BIA Route 5010, the exact route Yazzie took 3 weeks prior. The dust rises behind me, an ephemeral, rust-colored ghost tailing the car. This land, the Dainita, is saturated with history and myth. Everything feels ancient, the high peaks holding secrets that the rock formations only hint at. And then I noticed the time. I checked my digital clock, 0:15 a.m., just 5 minutes ago. Now, it reads 0:27 a.m. I hadn't been reviewing the file that long. I certainly hadn't driven 12 minutes. I checked the cruiser's internal timer, the one hardwired to the internal GPS. It confirms the passage of 12 minutes. My internal sense of time is already fracturing, separating from the electronic record. It's a common psychological effect in high-stress, isolated environments, I tell myself. The vastness swallows minutes whole. But the dread is not psychological. It's ambient. It's the sheer weight of the high desert silence, which is so profound it feels less like an absence of noise and more like a compression chamber designed to crush sound itself. I think some crimes were never meant to be solved. They exist outside the jurisdiction of mortal law, residing in the deep earth and the shadow of the peaks. I glanced back at the file on the seat. Yazzie's last written line, before the subsequent log entries were just blank pages, was a notation about the tracks. They walked out of the circle of light. He meant the flashlight beam. A simple, factual statement that now reads like a terminal diagnosis. I pressed the accelerator, driving deeper into the silence, trying to catch up to the minutes I lost. The engine noise of my cruiser, a familiar, comforting growl, sounds brittle and thin against the vastness of the reservation. I am now driving through a territory known locally as the Whispering Flats, miles of scrub brush and red sand where the ground is littered with petrified wood fragments. The fog, which was merely mist back on the highway, has thickened here into a blinding, rolling white sheet, defying all logic for this dry climate. It clings low to the ground, giving the illusion that I am driving on a cloud, with the actual earth lost somewhere beneath the spectral light of the fog lamps. I check my mirror. Behind the wall of moisture and darkness, there are no headlights, no traffic, only the endless reach of the black sky and the terrifying proximity of the stars. Out here, the radio signal is supposed to fail completely. It's notoriously difficult terrain for conventional communications. Yet, the static remains. Persistent. Close. I lean forward, adjusting the squelch on the radio unit. Usually, adjusting the squelch tightens the receiver, silencing the background hiss until a strong signal breaks through. But tonight, the static remains regardless of how high I set the threshold. It's not simply noise. It's an occupation of the frequency, a low-level, resonant hum that seems to originate not from the antenna, but from the chassis of the car itself. It vibrates in my teeth. I check Yazzie's digital patrol log again, cross-referencing my location with his last recorded coordinates. He was significantly further north than I am now, near a series of ancient ruins. According to the timestamps on his logs, Yazzie spent approximately 5 hours patrolling this specific region of the flats between 1 a.m. and 6 a.m. that night. 5 hours of routine driving, with zero activity reported, zero traffic stops, zero calls. A massive administrative blank spot. I am operating based on police procedure, attempting to verify a patrol route. But the deeper I drive, the more I encounter elements that defy bureaucratic logic. The fog, the hyper-persistent static, and now, the sound. At first, I mistake it for wind howling through the canyon systems miles away. It's a sustained, high-pitched vocalization, something between a long whistle and a mournful cry. It dips and rises with a slow, deliberate rhythm that is unnervingly musical, yet completely inhuman. I pull the car over, cutting the engine. The immediate silence rushes in, deafening and cold. I roll down the window fully. The air that flows in carries the scent of dust, juniper, and something else, something sharp and metallic, like ozone or fresh blood. The sound is undeniably singing. But it's not human larynx and vocal cords producing that tone. It seems to drift from multiple directions at once, echoing off the invisible rock faces concealed by the fog. It has an immense carrying quality, as if the singer is miles away, yet also right outside my window. I immediately think of the local legends, the myths that patrol this territory just as often as the tribal police. The Yinald-Lushii, the skinwalkers. This area is notorious for tales of shapeshifters, dark sorcerers who practice prohibited magic and often appear in the form of animals or shadows, sometimes singing to disorient their prey. Yazzie, a local man raised on the res, would know these legends intimately. He wouldn't dismiss them as folklore. He would treat them as legitimate threats. I grabbed the heavy mag light from the console and stepped out of the vehicle, planting my boots firmly on the damp, sandy ground. The fog swallows the light immediately, turning the powerful beam into a pale, useless orb only a few feet in diameter. The cold permeates my uniform. The singing intensifies, moving closer, and I realize the pattern isn't musical at all. It's linguistic. It's a language composed of pure, drawn-out vowels and terrifying clicks that defy human phonetics. I step back instinctively toward the cruiser. Maintain procedure. Do not engage. But what am I engaging with? A weather anomaly? A hallucination caused by stress and the pervasive silence? Or the reason Yazzie has refused to speak for 3 weeks? The fear is not the spike of adrenaline associated with a known physical threat. It's a quiet terror, a realization that the foundational rules of physics and biology that govern my reality are suspended here. I think some crimes were never meant to be solved, especially when the jurisdiction includes entities that predate human memory. As I scramble back into the driver's seat, I look down at my hands on the steering wheel. They are steady. My training is holding. But the chill I felt outside seems to have come into the car with me. I start the engine, throwing the transmission into drive. I need a hard anchor point, something undeniable. The substation. Yazzie's office. The field camera footage. I need to see exactly what he saw. I accelerate, pushing the heavy sedan through the dense fog, driving blind, guided only by the faint glow of the dash lights and the terrible, resonant singing echoing off the invisible canyons. I finally managed to outrun the worst of the fog, bursting out onto a slightly more traveled road near the substation entrance just as 3 a.m. ticks over. The substation itself is a low, single-story block building, utilitarian and unremarkable, but tonight it feels like a bunker. The silence here is bureaucratic, heavy walls and fluorescent hum, a welcome change from the oppressive desert void. I bypass my own temporary desk and head straight for the evidence lockup. Yazzie is on paid leave, technically, but his equipment, his squad car, his radio unit, his uniform, all remain impounded pending the psychological review. My objective, according to the official police procedure log, is to review the last 30 minutes of his body-worn camera, BWC, footage and field camera data from that fateful night. The evidence room is chilly, smelling of stale paper and antiseptic. Yazzie's BWC unit is marked with an evidence tag, sitting on a shelf. I download the data to a secure laptop and open the playback software. The initial footage is mundane. It's timestamped 2:47 a.m., approximately 4 hours into his silence-filled patrol shift. The image is grainy, slightly distorted by the cold, but clear enough. Yazzie is standing outside his cruiser, spotlight blazing, conducting what appears to be a routine traffic stop on a lone, dilapidated pickup truck pulled over on the shoulder of BIA Route 5010, exactly where I experienced the singing. Yazzie's voice is calm, professional. "Sir, I just need to see your license and registration." The driver, visible briefly in the harsh glare of the spotlight, is a thin, older Navajo man, face shadowed by a wide-brimmed hat. He appears nervous, fumbling with his wallet. This is the police procedural anchor, the traffic stop, a standard, verifiable event. Yet, the atmosphere is already wrong. The background is utterly black, not just night, but a void that seems to absorb all light, making the scene feel like it's floating in zero gravity. There is no sound of crickets, no wind, nothing but Yazzie's voice and the slight hum of his own patrol vehicle. As Yazzie leans down to take the documents, the driver says something in soft, rapid Navajo. Yazzie pauses, standing upright, tilting his head. He asks, "Can you repeat that, sir? I didn't catch the last part." The driver replies, and this time, the words are clearer, though still low. "I don't understand the language, but the inflection is desperate, pleading." Yazzie's hand moves to his side, resting near his sidearm, but he doesn't draw it. His training is impeccable. He's assessing, not escalating. Then, the true horror begins. The spotlight, which had been fixed on the pickup's cab, begins to flicker violently, not electrically, but as if an invisible curtain is being rapidly drawn across the beam. Yazzie steps back, his boots crunching loudly on the gravel. He raises his flashlight. The handheld beam illuminates the back of the pickup. It's filled with objects wrapped in tarps, indistinct shapes. But as the light hits them, the darkness in the background seems to expand rapidly, swallowing the edge of the light beam. The driver, still seated in the cab, begins to laugh. It's a choked, dry sound, without joy, pure hysteria. Yazzie doesn't say a word, but his breathing, captured by the mic near his chest, becomes harsh and shallow. He backs up one more step toward his cruiser. The camera lens suddenly focuses on the ground, indicating Yazzie dropped his flashlight. He raises his hands in front of him, not defensively, but almost religiously, like warding off an invisible force. In the final seconds of the usable footage, the darkness rushes in entirely. The sound of the driver's hysterical laughter is replaced by a wet, sickening, snapping sound. The video cuts out abruptly at 2:51 a.m. The next 5 minutes of data are just static noise and blackness, until the camera unit was apparently turned off completely at 2:56 a.m. Yazzie returned to the substation less than an hour later, without his flashlight, without the truck, and without any memory of the event, or at least any willingness to articulate it. He was processing paperwork when his shift supervisor noticed his utter, terrifying silence. I stare at the frozen frame, the point where the darkness overtook the light. What horrified him was not the driver. It was what was in the truck bed, or perhaps what was rushing toward him from the perimeter of the light. Yazzie, a man trained to use force against physical threats, did not reach for his gun. He raised his hands, an act of submission, or perhaps recognition. This is the supernatural element, the darkness that expanded, violating the physics of light, rushing forward like a sentient predator. It wasn't the night, it was the shadow itself. I think some crimes were never meant to be solved, because the evidence is stored not on a server, but in the silence of a man who saw the mechanism of reality break. I closed the laptop. The coldness I felt earlier, the psychic chill, is now locked inside the small room with me. I have the location of the stop, BIA 5010. I need to return to the precise coordinates and see what was left behind. The sun is just a suggestion of pale yellow beyond the eastern horizon when I return to BIA 5010. The pre-dawn light, however, doesn't alleviate the dread. It only sharpens the topography of the horror. I find the exact spot using the GPS coordinates from Yazzie's logs, a nondescript pull-off flanked by ancient sandstone formations. There are no skid marks, no broken glass, no sign of the routine traffic stop that occurred here. The only thing different from the rest of the road is the silence. This spot holds the absolute, compressed silence that I felt back in Section 2, but amplified. The desert sounds, the buzzing of early insects, the rustle of scrub, refuse to exist here. It's a pocket universe of sound deprivation. According to the coordinates, the pickup truck was stopped facing west. The driver's side, where Yazzie stood, was facing a small, nearly invisible break in the rock formation, the entrance to a small, unmarked box canyon, miles from any recognized trail. The canyon is deep, dark, and appears entirely impenetrable even in the growing light. I grabbed the emergency kit and my shotgun, standard procedure when entering an unknown environment after witnessing footage of supernatural, light-devouring darkness. I communicate my coordinates via the radio, though I know the transmission will be weak. Dispatch, this is Unit 105, checking 10 to 21 at coordinates 36.65 N, 108.81 W. Entering structure. Advise. The radio responds with only a burst of that familiar, strained static. No human voice. I leave the radio open, the static a desperate lifeline. I enter the canyon mouth. The temperature drops instantly. It must be 40 degrees colder inside this fissure than outside in the morning sun. The canyon walls rise 60 feet on either side, narrow enough that I have to walk sideways in certain places. The ground is dry, fine silt. I move slowly, my shotgun held ready, relying on my flashlight even in the early light, because the canyon acts as a chute for the remaining darkness. The sheer scale of the rock is breathtaking. This is the grounded realism anchor, the immense, ancient geology of the place. It puts human concerns, even police work, into a frightening perspective. About 50 yards in, the canyon opens into a small, circular clearing. The air here is dead, motionless, yet I can feel a distinct pressure against my eardrums, the kind you feel descending rapidly in an airplane. And then I see it. It's a small piece of fabric, synthetic, faded blue. It's caught on a thorny yucca plant near the center of the clearing. I approach cautiously. It's a swatch of police uniform, specifically a sleeve patch from a Navajo Tribal Police standard issue shirt. It bears Sergeant Yazzie's initials, embroidered in white thread. I kneel down to inspect it. The material isn't torn. It looks precisely sliced, surgically removed. There are no signs of a struggle, no blood, nothing that would suggest a violent disarming. It feels intensely cold to the touch, colder than the rock. I sweep my light around the clearing again. The floor of the clearing is covered in fine, undisturbed silt, except for one area right beside the yucca plant. Here, the ground is pressed down, as if a large, heavy object had rested there for a significant period. I realize what I am looking at, a psychic footprint. This is the place where Yazzie faced whatever he faced, the place where he was fundamentally altered. I begin to feel the presence. It's not auditory, and it's not visual, but a dense, suffocating awareness that I am being observed by something immense, something vast, something that resides within the rock formations themselves. This is the mythic element, the physical manifestation of an ancient dread. It's the sheer, cold sentience of the place. I think some crimes were never meant to be solved, because the evidence is too heavy, too ancient, and the price of investigation is silence. I turn back toward the canyon entrance, feeling an irrational urgency to leave. My heart is thumping against my ribs. I take 3 quick steps and stop dead. I hear a subtle, scraping sound coming from the passage I just exited. It sounds like something immense dragging heavy leather or thick, scaled hide across the rock floor. I raise the shotgun, waiting, but the noise doesn't repeat. Then, from the canyon mouth, I see a brief, rapid flicker of light, a flash of green, gone in an instant. A reflection of my own flashlight? No, the canyon walls are red stone. I back up slowly until my spine hits the opposite rock face. I realize that the object in the bed of the pickup truck, the one wrapped in tarps, was not cargo. It was what they drove here. And Yazzie saw it. I remained pinned against the slick, cold rock face of the box canyon clearing. My internal clock is screaming, telling me to bolt, but my training demands I hold the line. The weight of the canyon walls presses in on me, and I can hear my own ragged breathing amplified in the enclosed space. The scraping sound doesn't return, but the silence, that heavy, ancient silence, is now vibrating, thick with anticipation. I keep the shotgun trained on the narrow fissure that serves as the canyon entrance. And then, the sound breaks. Not the scraping, but the radio. My open communication line, which had only been producing strange static, suddenly erupts with a crystal-clear broadcast. It's so clear it sounds like the speaker is sitting right next to me. But the voice is agonizingly slow. It is speaking Navajo, the tones elongated, each word dripping out like molasses, heavy with age and sorrow. This is the procedure anchor, a clear transmission on an unsanctioned frequency. I fumble for my body mic, desperate to record it, but the chilling cadence of the language paralyzes me. I don't understand the specific words, but I understand the tone, a deep, profound warning, laced with absolute despair. I reach for my external recorder, struggling to keep the shotgun steady. The voice continues its slow, rhythmic chant. I hear familiar sounds mixed into the flow, numbers, badge numbers. The voice pronounces the numbers distinctly, separating them by a long, terrible pause. 1, 0, 5. That's my unit number. Then, after a pause so long I start to doubt my sanity, the voice pronounces a sequence of numbers I know by heart from the case file. 2, 7, 7. Sergeant Yazzie's badge number. My name. His badge number. Connected by this terrifying, slow-motion broadcast from the very depths of the reservation. I managed to switch on the recorder, placing it near the cruiser's mic. The voice stops chanting numbers and returns to the slow, heavy Navajo. I can only grasp a few fragmented concepts based on my limited exposure to the culture and language references in the case file. Dine, the people, Yinald Lushii, the walker, and repeated use of the word cad, which means now, or at this very moment. The entire broadcast is one long, unbroken monologue, perhaps 3 minutes in length. It sounds less like a dispatch warning and more like a final confession or a lamentation. The voice is deep, gravelly, and clearly male, but it carries an echo, as if it is being spoken into a cavernous, empty space. I think back to the reflection of the Navajo driver's truck in Section 3, the one that caused Yazzie to raise his hands in silent recognition. He wasn't talking to a man. He was talking to a host, a vessel. And whatever was in the truck, whatever was generating that expanding darkness, was communicating with me now, using the voice of a man broken by the landscape. When the broadcast finally ceases, the radio doesn't return to static. It goes completely dead. Black silence. The power indicator light on the main unit flickers, then extinguishes. The radio system is entirely offline. I rush back to the canyon mouth. The faint green flicker I saw earlier repeats, just at the edge of the morning light filtering into the fissure. It's reflective, slick, and moves with a slow, deliberate speed. My training tells me to retreat, to call for backup. But I know backup is hours away, and the transmission I just recorded is too important, too vital to the silence that has consumed Yazzie. I take a breath of the cold, dead air. I think some crimes were never meant to be solved, because the truth requires stepping outside the protective light of civilization and into the dark space where ancient laws hold sway. I holster the shotgun, deciding to retreat immediately to my vehicle. I have the location, the patch, and the chilling audio recording. That's more than enough. But as I take a final look at the canyon clearing, I notice that the sun is higher now, but the light is doing something impossible. The light is hitting the back wall of the canyon, yet the shadows on the ground are moving against the angle of the sun. They are independent entities, stretching and contracting not due to the solar movement, but due to something internal, something breathing in the cold air. I turn and break into a run, scrambling through the narrow fissure, desperate to reach the relative safety of the squad car and the sanity of the main road. I burst out of the canyon mouth, lungs burning, tripping over the loose gravel and hitting the sandy road shoulder. I slam the cruiser door shut, lock it, and throw myself across the seat, struggling to catch my breath. The silence of the desert seems to have returned, but it's a manufactured silence now, the absolute absence of signal from the dead radio confirming the supernatural nature of the transmission. I check my surroundings. Everything appears normal. The rising sun, the familiar profile of the sandstone ridges, the dust settling around the car. But I look toward the canyon entrance, the narrow, deep fissure that led to the clearing, and a wave of confusion washes over me. The entrance is gone. I stare at the place where the walls were split. Now, it's a continuous, solid wall of red rock, the surface appearing thousands of years old, utterly undisturbed. There is no break, no fissure, no gap wide enough for a person to walk through. The landscape itself has stitched itself back together, obliterating the physical evidence of the box canyon. This is the psychological break, the final push into the impossible. I was inside that canyon for over 20 minutes. I ran out of it less than 60 seconds ago. I immediately try to ground myself with the factual anchor, the GPS. I pull up the coordinates I transmitted just minutes prior, 36.65 N, 108.81 W. My current location confirmation shows I am still sitting at those coordinates. But the map overlay shows only smooth, unbroken rock face where the canyon should be. The realization is paralyzing. I was allowed into that space, but I was not meant to leave without being changed, just like Yazzie. The canyon was a temporary aperture, opened by the presence of the entities in the pickup truck, and it closed the moment I retrieved the evidence. I looked down at my hand. I still clutched the tribal police patch, Yazzie's initials embroidered on the blue fabric. It's freezing cold, radiating a subtle, metallic chill that counteracts the warming sun. It is the only physical proof that the last hour wasn't a psychotic break. I check my face in the rearview mirror, trying to assess the state of my own exhaustion and terror. My eyes are wide, pupils dilated. But as I stare into the glass, the reflection shifts. It is only for a fleeting second, perhaps half the time it takes to blink, but it is enough to stop my heart. My reflection is superimposed with another image, the face of Sergeant Yazzie. It's not a hallucination of the mind, but a spectral shift in the silver backing of the mirror. His face is pale, covered in a thin veneer of dust. His uniform is torn. His eyes, the haunted, vacant eyes I saw at the substation, are fixed on mine. His mouth is wide open, a scream of pure, desperate agony, contorting his features into something monstrous. But there is no sound. The visual noise, the silent scream captured in the reflection, is the final supernatural element. It's the mechanism of his fate, the overwhelming horror that shattered his ability to vocalize. Yazzie saw what the sound was, and it was so terrifying, so fundamentally alien, that it broke his link to communication. The silence is not a choice. It's a symptom of overwhelming existential trauma. The image vanishes, and the mirror returns my own terrified, familiar face. I think some crimes were never meant to be solved, because the solution requires sacrificing the integrity of the self, surrendering the ability to speak the truth. I quickly record a voice memo on my cell phone, summarizing the events, the disappearing canyon, the clear Navajo transmission, the mirror image, before I, too, lose the ability to articulate what happened. My voice sounds thin, brittle, already fading. I start the engine, throwing gravel onto the rock face that was once a canyon. I have to get out of the high desert. I have to get back to the familiar, controllable noise of the precinct, the meaningless chatter of the modern world, before the silence takes root in my own throat. I press the accelerator to the floor, speeding away from the coordinates, away from the solid evidence of impossible geology. The rearview mirror shows only the retreating, untouched desert. But I know that the silence, Yazzie's silence, is riding shotgun. The drive back to the substation is a blur of accelerating light, chasing the rising sun. I never stop checking the rearview mirror, but the spectral face of Sergeant Yazzie does not return. The cruiser's radio remains stubbornly dead, an expensive piece of equipment reduced to a silent block of plastic and wires. I pull into the empty precinct lot just as the morning shift officers are starting to arrive, their faces fresh, their movements brisk. They nod, oblivious to the history I just traversed. I feel like I've aged 20 years in one midnight shift. I park, cut the engine, and the world rushes back in. The squeak of the suspension, the clicking of the cooling manifold, the far-off sound of an industrial ventilation fan. Noise. Glorious, comforting noise. I sit there, clutching the cold, blue uniform patch, listening to the ambient sounds of the waking world. I can articulate what I saw. I can describe the geography, the time shift, the supernatural dread. I can play the chilling audio file of the slow, sorrowful voice repeating my unit number. But as I look at my hand and the fingers that grip the steering wheel, I realize a subtle change has occurred. My palm is raw, scraped red where the friction of the wheel's texture chafed against my skin during the frantic drive.